There comes a moment in history when a nation stands at the edge of the unknown, staring at a challenge so massive that even the most dominant powers hesitate. The world watches, skeptics whisper, critics laugh, and allies stay silent. Fear becomes the invisible wall no one dares to climb, and then, one country, fueled not by arrogance but by conviction, steps forward. That country is India. Fear has always been the greatest enemy of progress. It is not the lack of resources, not the shortage of manpower, not even the complexity of technology that halts humanity. It is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of what happens if we lose. America, with all its strength and influence, once hesitated in the face of this same fear. Yet India, rising from centuries of struggle, chose not to wait, not to doubt, not to bow. Instead, it acted. What the world often forgets is that transformation doesn't come from the comfortable. It comes from those who dare to enter the uncomfortable, who step into the darkness when the light seems too far away. India's power wasn't in its weapons or its wealth. It was in its mindset. It was the belief that limits are illusions created by those who never tried. Think about it. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every leap humanity has ever taken was branded impossible at first. When others said, "It cannot be done," India replied, "Watch us." That boldness is not recklessness. It is courage wrapped in vision. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. For India, that something was destiny, pride, and the right to shape its own future. And here lies the lesson, not just for nations, but for every individual listening right now. How often do we stop ourselves from greatness because of fear? How many times do we dream, only to let hesitation kill the dream before it even breathes? India's story is proof that when you silence fear and replace it with determination, the impossible bends. The most powerful nations in the world rise not because they avoid fear, but because they confront it. India's step forward was more than political strategy or technological achievement. It was a signal to humanity. It was a message that fear is a cage, and only those who are willing to break the bars will ever taste true freedom. So today, the world doesn't just see a nation that acted. It sees a symbol of courage. A billion voices, once underestimated, now echo a single truth. Greatness doesn't belong to the fearless. It belongs to those who move forward despite fear. And in that single act of defiance against hesitation, India shifted the balance of history. Every era produces a defining moment when the world collectively holds its breath. The question is never about what is easy, but about who dares to do what others dismiss as impossible. Most nations play it safe, waiting for certainty before they act. But true transformation has never been born from safety. It comes from those rare decisions that seem reckless to the cautious, yet revolutionary to the brave. India's rise was not built on copying footsteps. It was built on carving new ones. When others hesitated, India stepped forward. When others calculated risks, India embraced the challenge. The world said, "This cannot be done." India replied, "It must be done." And that single shift in conviction changed the trajectory of history. What separates the ordinary from the extraordinary is not strength or size. It is audacity. To reach where no one else dares to go, you must be willing to do what no one else is willing to try. The world's greatest powers have often hesitated at this edge, trapped in their own fear of failure or loss. Yet India chose a different path. It chose to leap where others stalled. Think about the magnitude of that decision. It wasn't just strategy, it was vision. It wasn't just bravery, it was belief. Belief that destiny does not reward the timid. Belief that every great leap forward begins with a step that looks insane to the cautious. Belief that history remembers the doers, not the doubters. And here lies a truth that extends far beyond nations. It reaches into your life, into mine, into anyone who has ever been told you can't. How many dreams have died in silence because someone lacked the courage to try? How many innovations were buried because fear strangled them before they were born. India teaches us that sometimes the most dangerous move is not to act at all. The world respects results, but it bows to courage. When a nation, a leader, or an individual dares to go against the grain, the world watches. And even if the world resists at first, eventually it must acknowledge the power of boldness. That's exactly what happened when India refused to follow the safe route and chose instead to write its own story. Here's the paradox of greatness. The unthinkable looks insane until it works. And once it works, it becomes the new standard, the new normal, the new proof that limits our illusions. Every breakthrough in science, politics, and humanity started with someone who had the courage to face ridicule, to face resistance, to face failure, and still move forward. India became that someone on the global stage. Not because it had all the answers, but because it dared to ask the questions others were afraid to face. Not because it was fearless, but because it acted despite fear. And in doing so, it reminded the world of a timeless truth. Progress belongs to those who risk everything for a vision bigger than themselves. There was a time when the world looked at India and saw only limitations. Poverty, division, struggle, these were the labels stamped onto its image. Global powers dismissed it as too chaotic, too fragmented, too weak to rise beyond survival. But history has a way of humbling those who underestimate. What many failed to recognize was that hidden beneath the dust of struggle was a fire that refused to die, a fire that would one day light the path forward, not just for itself, but for the world. Every great story begins with doubt. The doubters define the underdog, pointing out every weakness, every shortcoming, but the beauty of the underdog lies in its hunger. While others grow complacent in their power, the underestimated learn to fight harder, dream bigger, and rise higher. India embraced that role. Instead of breaking under the weight of skepticism, it sharpened itself against it. Every challenge became fuel. Every obstacle became a stepping stone. What makes this transformation so extraordinary is not that India simply caught up to others. No, India redefined the game. It moved from being viewed as a follower to becoming a leader, from being ignored to being impossible to overlook, from surviving to setting standards. This wasn't luck. This was resilience forged through centuries of endurance. The underdog mindset is powerful because it breeds resourcefulness. When the world doubts you, you learn to find strength where others don't look. You innovate because you must. You unite because you cannot afford division. And you push harder because you have nothing to lose. India embodied that spirit until one day it no longer played catch-up. It began to set the pace. This is the heart of transformation. To move from being underestimated to being unstoppable. To take the very conditions meant to break you and turn them into the reasons you rise. What once was mocked as weakness became the foundation of strength. The same voices that once dismissed India now study its strategies, follow its innovations, and respect its influence. And this is not just a story about a nation. It is a mirror for every individual who has ever been counted out. Maybe you've been underestimated. Maybe people doubted your ability, your vision, your capacity to succeed. Remember this, the greatest advantage an underdog has is that no one sees them coming. That's the power of surprise. That's the power of resilience. That's the power of refusing to accept the limits placed upon you by others. India's journey reminds us all that being underestimated is not a curse. It's an opportunity. An opportunity to rise higher than expected, to silence doubt with action, and to prove that strength is not measured by where you start, but by how far you are willing to go. And when that transformation happens, the underdog doesn't just win, it leads. It becomes the trail others follow. It changes the course of history. Throughout history, nations have fought for dominance with armies, navies, and vast stockpiles of power. Strength was measured in steel, firepower, and territory. But the world has changed. In this new age, the greatest battles are not fought on the ground. They are fought in the mind. The future no longer belongs to those with the biggest weapons. It belongs to those who can imagine, create, and innovate. India understood this shift earlier than most. While others invested solely in military muscle, India invested in something far more powerful: human potential. It realized that 1 billion people, united not just by borders but by ideas, could generate an unstoppable force. And instead of asking, how do we match the world's strength, the question became, how do we surpass it by thinking differently? That's the genius of transformation. When you can't win by playing the same game, you invent a new one. Innovation is the ultimate equalizer. It doesn't matter if you begin with fewer resources, less wealth, or less recognition. If you can create something the world has never seen before, suddenly the playing field shifts. Suddenly, the balance of power tilts in your direction. Think about it. The most influential breakthroughs in history didn't come from the strongest nations. They came from the boldest thinkers. From the printing press to the internet, from space exploration to renewable energy, progress has always belonged to those who dared to ask, what if? India's rise in this century has been fueled by that very question. What if we build technology that reshapes communication? What if we develop systems that reach the poorest citizen? What if we invest in science that takes us to the stars? And the answer has been extraordinary. Satellites launched on budgets smaller than Hollywood movies. Digital infrastructure that connects hundreds of millions at lightning speed. Medical and scientific achievements that rival the very best in the world. This is not power measured in tanks or missiles. It is power measured in ideas. It is power that inspires, power that endures. The lesson here is simple. In today's world, the most dangerous weapon is not fear, not aggression, not dominance. It is imagination. A nation that dares to think differently cannot be stopped. And a person who dares to think differently cannot be ignored. So ask yourself, where in your life are you still trying to fight battles with old weapons? Where are you trying to use strength when what you really need is creativity? India's journey proves that true leadership doesn't come from following the same path as everyone else. It comes from building a new road where none exists. And once that path is built, once the spark of innovation turns into a blaze, the world has no choice but to notice. Because power today is not about who can destroy the most, it's about who can build the future. And those who choose to build lead. When you look at history, every great civilization, every lasting movement, every nation that rose beyond expectation, did so not because of sheer size or wealth, but because it found a way to align its people toward a shared purpose. Numbers alone don't create power. Resources alone don't build greatness. What transforms potential into achievement is a unifying vision that binds millions into one unstoppable force. India's story is proof of this timeless truth. A nation of over 1 billion voices, diverse in culture, language, and tradition, faced the challenge of fragmentation. The world expected division to be its downfall, but instead of breaking apart, India chose to forge strength from its differences. The diversity that once seemed like a weakness became its greatest asset. When those voices harmonized around a common dream, the result was a surge of power no rival could ignore. Vision is the compass. It takes raw energy and points it in a direction that matters. Without it, even the strongest army scatters. With it, even ordinary people can move mountains. India's vision was not just survival. It was progress. It was dignity. It was the determination to take its rightful place among the leaders of the world. And unity was the fuel. Because when people believe in the same dream, they don't just work. They fight, they sacrifice, they persist through storms that would break others. That's why unity is more powerful than fear, more enduring than wealth, and more transformative than any single act of leadership. This is not just about nations. It's about you, about me, about anyone striving for something greater. A vision without unity remains a dream. Unity without vision becomes chaos. But when the two meet, the impossible becomes inevitable. Families thrive, companies soar, and movements shift the very fabric of society. Think about it. Every breakthrough in history came from groups of people who aligned their efforts around one idea. From independence struggles to scientific revolutions, the common denominator was never a single hero. It was the collective will of many who believed in the same purpose. India's journey reflects that same principle on a massive scale. And here's the real lesson. Unity doesn't mean sameness. It means choosing to rise above differences for something bigger than yourself. It means recognizing that progress demands sacrifice, patience, and trust. It means seeing the bigger picture, even when the smaller details tempt you to fight. When India united around its vision, it created momentum so powerful that even the most skeptical had to take notice. That momentum carried it from doubt to respect, from survival to influence, and it sent a message to the world. No force is greater than a people who know what they want and refuse to be divided in their pursuit of it. Because in the end, greatness doesn't come from wealth, weapons, or words. It comes from people, united in heart and driven by a vision so strong that nothing, no obstacle, no rival, no fear can stand in their way. There are moments in history when a single nation's rise becomes more than just its own story. It becomes a signal to the rest of the world, a reminder, a wake-up call, a declaration that the balance of power, the definition of leadership, and the very idea of what's possible has shifted forever. India's journey is one of those moments. What began as resilience in the face of doubt has transformed into inspiration for the planet. The world once saw a nation struggling to find its footing, and now it witnesses a nation setting the pace for the future. This transformation isn't just about India. It's about what humanity can achieve when willpower outpaces fear and when vision becomes stronger than limitation. The message is simple yet profound. Never underestimate the power of belief. For decades, many thought progress was the privilege of a few. They believed innovation belonged only to wealthy nations, that influence was the inheritance of the already powerful. But India shattered that illusion. It showed that strength is not born of privilege, it is born of perseverance. It showed that greatness is not owned by a few. It can be claimed by anyone willing to rise above doubt. And what does this mean for the rest of the world? It means the excuses are gone. It means no country, no community, no individual can say, we cannot rise, we cannot achieve, we cannot lead. Because once the so-called underdog proves it possible, the door is open for all who dare to walk through it. India's rise is not a threat to others. It is a challenge to dream bigger, a challenge to compete with creativity, not just force, a challenge to build instead of destroy, a challenge to recognize that the future will not be claimed by those who cling to the past, but by those who dare to write a new chapter. And for individuals listening today, this message goes deeper. It's not only nations that rise, people rise too. You may feel underestimated. You may feel the odds are stacked against you. You may feel the world doesn't expect much from you, but remember, so did India. And yet, through belief, unity, innovation, and courage, it turned doubt into dominance. That same spirit lies within you. The world is not waiting for permission. It is not waiting for perfect timing. It is waiting for action, for vision, for leaders who choose to step forward when everyone else holds back. India has proven that the impossible bends to those who dare. So here is the message the world cannot ignore. The future belongs not to the biggest, not to the strongest, not to the wealthiest, but to those who are bold enough to claim it. And once claimed, the world will never be the same again.